Hello everybody. How is everyone doing? This is Islam. The song is Wrong Crowd by Tom Odell. Odell? I don't really know how you would pronounce that. There are people freaking out my Twitter mentions. Should I go check that out, or is it not really worth it? Give me one sec. Oh gosh. Okay. One laptop works, other laptop doesn't. Hello, Mother. I'm glad you were joining for the live today. How is everyone? Doing great. How are you? I'm very good. I have to say I am loving this book. Loving it. I'm in Hawaii right now shooting a project. I'm officially 100% caught up on Game of Thrones. Like I'm 100. It took me 2 weeks. Started in episode 1. It's a little insane, the binge that Tessa and I did, but I can now say I'm 100% caught up. So many questions about the first few chapters. All good. Make sure you have them written down, or if you want to talk about them, we're here. Now, what I like to do, I don't know if, Game of Thrones. I'm all caught up now. Wow. Somewhere in season 5, you gotta get through it. I did with Tessa, and it was an amazing experience. Oh, I went so hard. Like, that's the thing. Like, TV's my job, right? So, literally, we binged. We did well. I'm proud of us. The book has so many characters that get introduced all at once, and I'm confused. Yes, this book is similar because it's talking about 3 generations. Macon Dead the first, who had Pilot and Macon. Macon Dead the second, or Macon Dead Jr., who is Milkman's father, and then Milkman. So it does get a little confusing. So I understand, but we're gonna talk all about it. This book is huge. Yes, it is. I realize that the language at times can be a little complex, but that's because of the way that she writes. And I feel like a lot of what I was seeing on Twitter, everyone kind of was on the same page, where it took a chapter to get used to it, maybe 2 or 3, and then after that, you were like, whoa! It got really interesting. So if you guys are like me, what I like to do is I like to go onto SparkNotes and I like to look up analyses. I like to look up people that analyze the book and different chapters, and I like to look all of that up. I will warn you, I get spoiled a lot of the time by some analyses. So so just be aware of that. If you're going to look stuff up, you're probably going to get spoiled if it's not SparkNotes. SparkNotes is really good at making sure everything is sectioned off into chapters. So, thank you guys for joining. A few of you are asking. We are reading Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. This book won the Nobel Prize, and it was written in 1977. One of Morrison's big hits, like one of her most, I think, not famous, but a big book for her. It's okay if you're struggling. This book, I'm not spoiling on purpose. It was more of an accidental spoiling this morning when I was looking stuff up to talk about, and I was like, oh, and this God, there's no alert at the top of the page. So then I went back to my ever faithful SparkNotes, where you can, if you don't look at the themes, if you look at just chapters, analysis, and stuff, it does better. But the themes tend to kind of give stuff away, so be aware of that. So yeah, let's do it how we always do it. What are your first thoughts? And no, I have not seen Endgame yet. If anyone spoils any of Endgame, I will block you. This is serious. Do not spoil Endgame. Alright, so let's start from the top. What are the first one-word thoughts? How are we liking this book? How are we liking Toni Morrison? This is the first novel we've read of hers. What's going on? The bookstore didn't have a copy. I am so sorry to hear that. Hallmark is my weakness. You be careful. Don't think I don't know my Marvel and DC, but those jokes is not jokes. Tony's writing style is great. Messed up, interesting, unusual but interesting. The stories mirrors many questions of modern era, like where did I come from or where's my role in all of this? Interesting. Morrison's somewhat erratic way of jumping from one character's background to another might be confusing at first, but soon enough I get hooked to every single one of her stories. Exactly. Incredible but complex. Yes. I think one of the reasons this book gets a little complex with its language and it takes a bit to get into because it does border magical realism in an interesting way. It's not just like an account of what's happening. Like the idea that Freddy was born by, was it Freddy that was born by the white bull? His mother saw a white bull charging at him. And you'll see that there are very few white characters in this book as well. That's on purpose. And then we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so there is this, it's not a magical realist book, but it has some themes that kind of guide into that. Confusing at first, really like it. With the racial side of things, it reminds me of The Hate U Give. Yes, it does. It was confusing first, but then I started to enjoy it. I'm glad you started to enjoy it, Cat Fernandez. I enjoy nonlinear storytelling. Good, this book might be pretty sweet. Really don't want to miss anything, so how much are we reading this week? That's a big question. We're on 166, probably to like, yeah. Probably going to read to chapter 11, if anyone's curious. But we'll talk about that also towards the end. But if you have to leave, I understand. So, chapter 11-ish. I thought it was really interesting where the names the characters came from. I thought the story about Katara was funny. Yes, and names are a huge thing in this book. Especially with how some of them are given. Some of them own their names. Some of them, I think Katara like owns his name, whereas I think Milkman he's aware of what it was. Remember, there was a whole part where he didn't really know how he got that name, Milkman. I had to get used to jumping around, but soon I did. Confusing. I don't know what reading while I'm sick. I know when I'm reading and I'm sick, I can't read. So I understand that. Dialect, okay. Little confusing, interesting. Hard to get these books when the closest thing to a bookstore in your town is the book section in Walmart. Wow. Yes. I know Amazon is really great for that. They tend to do pretty well. You can even buy like used copies, so they're not too expensive, and you can pay more on shipping if you need to. But I'm a big proponent for Amazon. It confused me at times, but it's good. It's interesting. Different to anything I've read before. Interesting. Yes, Freddy. Okay. Lots of symbolism for sure. I didn't like it at first, but now I'm liking it. I like the title is a biblical thing, but not really at the same time, and that's interesting too. I'm glad you touched on that, because a lot of the names, I think all the names are from the Bible. 1 Corinthians, Magdalene, like Mary Magdalene. Then you have Pilate, Pontius Pilate. All of those names are from the Bible, and I think there is a reason for that. We'll talk about that later. I'm thoroughly enjoying the use of language, dialects. I reread a couple parts in 4 and 6. Hard to chew. Very, very, very visual. That's one of the things that made me fall in love with Toni Morrison's writing, is that she's so metaphor queen. Yeah, extremely visual, to the point that you can I think this book is actually one of the books that's best, takes a little longer, but best to read out loud. And really, like someone said, chewing on the words. The way she writes makes it feel like you can chew on these words. Her voice made Milkman think of pebbles, little round pebbles that bumped up against each other. Maybe she was hoarse, or maybe it was the way she said her words, with both a drawl and a clip. The piney, whiny smell was narcotic, and so was the sun streaming in, strong and unfettered, because there were no curtains or I feel like her language is so, you can feel it. Toni Morrison's Magic Realism, thank you. Well, thank you for joining for a bit. I'm so behind, could you please let me know what book we're reading? Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. Okay, I appreciate also the unusual civilians curious. And the racism reminded me of that. This book has a lot of references to racism. One of the symbols in this book, whiteness, the artificial roses, I'm not going to talk about the other one that's in the Spark Notes because it does spoil things. But those first two, we'll see. Almost all, if I'm going to read this because I think it's interesting now that we brought that up. Whiteness. Almost all of the characters in Song of Solomon are black. The few white characters represent violence and wrongdoing. After Guitar's father, Guitar tells that story about the mill and whatever. That guy doesn't really offer any support. When they take... Even white animals carry negative connotations. A white bull causes Freddie's mother to go into labor. The bull's interference with Freddie's birth represents white people's devastating interference with the African American world. Likewise, okay, we haven't seen that part, but so we do see that. 1 Corinthians and Lena make artificial roses that represent the stifling life of the upper class and the oppression of women. That's a big theme in this book too. The roses do not bring in much money. The true purpose of the activity is to provide a mindless distraction for their boredom. 1 Corinthians and Lena perform their task without any enthusiasm, motivated by habit rather than conviction. In literary works, living roses often symbolize love. The artificial roses symbolize the absence of love in Macon Jr.'s household. Unlike living plants, the artificial flowers convey only the depression of their makers. So she does have these things in them that I think her books are always amazing. Even though I was confused at first. Okay, how did I find the book? I had read some of Toni Morrison in high school. I read her book, Beloved, which I highly recommend. There is a movie that has Oprah Winfrey and Danny Glover in it. It's a fantastic movie. I would recommend it. And then because of that book, I started to like books like this, with all this imagery and metaphor and beautiful writing style. So I figured we should read one of her books, because this year we're trying to read more books by women and people of color, and Toni Morrison fits both of those categories. So I was very happy to have this book. And then also I found it on the list of Obama's favorite books. So I was like, that's pretty cool. It seems like his own mind erased the part of the reason he was called Milkman. Yes. I think that's interesting. What do I have here about that? Names. In Song of Solomon, names show the effects of both oppression and liberation. The fact that Milkman's nickname describes him better than his recorded name shows that written names are often unreliable. For this reason, they're often replaced by names of oral tradition. For example, Dr. Foster Street is officially labeled as Mains Avenue, but after his death, it is commonly known as not Dr. Street. Although the official name is accurate, the popular name is more descriptive. So names do have a big thing. Another example is Guitar's last name, Banes, which is a homonym for B-A-N-E-S, like the bane of something, or sources of distress. His name suggests the oppression he has suffered, and his oppression, and his profession as an assassin. So it's cool. And then now, looking at that, we want to look at all the other names that we have and see what they could be doing. Pilot, what could that name be doing? I tried reading it aloud, listening to the audiobook. It helped a lot. Yes. Does Caitlin Spree, does Toni Morrison do the audiobook? Because she did the audiobook for Beloved, and there's something truly special about hearing an author read their own book out loud. Pilot Appreciation Squad. Yeah, Pilot I think is an amazing character. And then I think it was chapter 6, that was mostly about her life. Loved it. Local nerd boy. Reading it around people was very difficult. I went and had pho last night, and I was in this, I was in, I guess, a Vietnamese restaurant having pho, and they had the TV on, and it was very loud where I was sitting, so it was hard for me to so I had to wait till I got home. But yeah. I'm scrolling down to the bottom, sorry. 30 pages left for the goal today. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. The snow in the beginning, yes, the red throughout, these colors. That's the thing. Toni Morrison has these. Everything there is purposeful. It's meant to guide. It's meant to show her. Even sometimes the beautiful thing about the imagery and the colors and stuff she uses is that it puts you in a mindset without you even realizing it, if you're not aware of it. And I think that's one of my favorite things about it. Okay, I didn't need that. Okay. Okay, how do I do that? I'm going to pin the title. Song of Solomon. I don't know how to pin it. I'm trying. Don't know how to pin this. Sorry. Okay. Ha ha. Got it. Okay, let me scroll back up. Oh, it was also in Oprah's book club. That makes sense, because Oprah was in Beloved. The bit with guitar explaining his reasons about being in the Seven honestly was an interesting topic of the book. I think that's fascinating, because one of the... Let me go back to this, because I do want to read part of it. What was the other thing I just read? So one of the themes in this book is the alienating effects of racism. Racism is the central cause of suffering in the novel. Racism has long-lasting damaging effects on the community. I mean, you think about how Guitar felt about Emmett Till's murder. Remember how impassioned he was, how upset he was, and I think that's one of the reasons that led him to want to become and be a big part of the Seven, Sunday Man. Guitar's story shows that racism alienates its victims from their native communities and causes them to lose touch with their own humanity. So we see that very clearly. How does everyone feel about Ruth? Yeah, let's do that. How are me and Tessa? Tessa's great. She'll probably be here in Hawaii soon to hang out for a bit. It's good. I feel a bit sad for Ruth. The writing style is so descriptive and detailed that it's hard not to look into the words. I can't put it down because of the curiosity and the technical. Yeah. Do I believe in ghosts? Yeah. When one of the characters who asked Milkman if he believed in ghosts, it got me thinking, do you believe in ghosts as well? Absolutely. Toni Morrison did the audiobook. Okay, so I would recommend it to anyone because she does an amazing job. It will take longer because it's someone reading out loud, but it'll be worth the time you spend. Trust me. Well, I think Athena Giordano, her marriage makes me sad. She deserves more than this husband, but every relationship around her, it's a little weird. I think we see the lasting effects of all of these. I mean, think of the childhood Macon Jr., so Milkman's father, and Pilot had, where their father was killed by these people trying to take his land, and they were forced to then split up and kind of make their own way. We've heard most of Pilot's story and how she came to move and find that island and then have Reba and then continue on, and then her whole journey to even find her brother was a thing. So we're seeing how the history that these people have come from have really affected who they are and who they're becoming. Interesting, right? Interesting. Now I read up to chapter 9. Rita. I have to read about Ruth's story in the Bible and actually all the women to understand more. If I'm correct, because I read it, but also Ruth, I'm pretty sure Ruth was the woman that gave Abraham a son in the Bible and then was cast away. Very similar to Ruth Foster Dad's story, where she was isolated after her 2 daughters, and then when she had a son, there was a glimmer of hope for her to kind of rebuild this relationship, and then kind of recast away. Okay, I'm scrolling down to the bottom, guys. Guitar speech at the end was really interesting. Sorry, I'm scrolling down. Oh gosh, we've been talking a lot. Oh, Christina Elizabeth, I think that's interesting. I think Ruth is the most interesting character because the magical growing tulip shows a lot about her. She puts all her love into the flowers because she can't express love. Okay, so not only is there something there, someone earlier asked how to explain for magical realism. In real life, outside, no one would plant a flower and we wouldn't see it grow and prosper into this forest of beautiful flowers. That wouldn't happen. But in this book, that's accepted as... Like, we don't know if that really happened. We hear from Milkman's point of view of watching that happen and seeing these flowers. So that would be magical realism, where it's this magicalness brought to reality that's seen as real. So she shows a lot about her. She puts her love into the flowers because she can't express love. Well, she can't express love, and love isn't returned to her. But in her flowers, the work she puts into them is returned back in their growth. So that's pretty cool, right? I accidentally read the whole book. That's awesome. Yes, okay, so back to Ruth. And that follows in reference through Ruth 1:16, where she says, "Do not ask me to leave thee." Ruth seems to be a victim of loneliness in her childhood and neglect in her adult life. I feel pity. I do too. I feel bad for her. Do you believe Ruth or Macon? Who's telling the truth? That's a good question, the Presta Mariana. I think they both are, because they're both telling their truth. And I think that's the hardest thing. You know? It's really hard to stop reading. It's one of those books that's like downhill, right? You start to roll, it starts to get good, and the next thing you know, you're like, oh wait, I shouldn't read more than this. And I really try not to read more than I should. Well, anyone else that understands that or can explain magical realism, did I do an alright job? Does that make sense? But I'm pretty sure that is. That's how I understand it. Perhaps it would all human relationships put down. Would you save my life or would you take it? Fascinating. What do I think about Hagar? Never trust book characters. The first lesson I learned in my creative writing classes, because characters always show their point of view. You do not always get the whole picture. And that's one of the things about this book, where we hear pieces of people's point of view, but really we know more about events. We know that an event started this book. This man tried to fly. And that's another thing, that there's this magical realism aspect. Because if you notice, no one was imploring him to get down. No one saw it. It was not a suicide attempt. No one saw him as trying to commit suicide. They saw him as trying to fly and seeing if it were possible. So I think that's something we have to look. That's another aspect of that, is that idea. It might. I think it will recur. Unreliable narrator. It's so true. Yes, it made sense. Okay. Cool. Thank you, guys. Hagar in the last part scared me a little bit. What was that guitar said to him, though, about, like, didn't you think this would happen? Like, come on. And that's another thing. Oh, okay, no, we'll continue, because that's a whole other thing. Yeah, but Hagar will never kill Milkman, because then she would despise the person that took him out of this world, which would be herself. Like, I think, didn't Pilate say that to Ruth? That, yeah, she wants him out because he's the person that took her away from him, but at the same time, she can't get rid of him because then she'll be the person that ended that. But I also find it fascinating the way that Pilate looks at death, because she doesn't have her experience with it, is that it doesn't really happen. Yeah, different time, I guess. Didn't think anything was wrong with sleeping with their cousin. Different time, maybe. Different world, literally. I think there's parallels between Hagar and Ruth. Absolutely. Absolutely. The different points of view to the same story was very apparent for what happened with Ruth and her father. Pilate was the kind voice of reason with that. It seems like she seems to be guiding people towards reason, as if she were a pilot of some sort. She could not get his love, and the possibility he didn't think of her at all was intolerable. So she settled for his fear. 7 days is absolutely a biblical reference. The world is created in 7 days, and they are, in effect, tearing it down in 7 days. Yes, thank you, Kat Parker. Awesome. I have very few quotes as well, but imagery I thought was beautiful. There was one amazing metaphor that I read and was like, that's amazing. I don't remember this, but I didn't have my pencil out at the time, so I was like, I'll remember where it is. Don't remember where it is. Don't remember what it is, but it was in the beginning of the book. Let's see. Aha. Nope. I think Hagar's afraid of herself, that she might kill Milkman. She doesn't want to kill him, but she still might. Maybe. Maybe. So why did she snap? Because of the thank you specifically? Maybe. Maybe it was that the love was no longer going to be returned, and it was seen as a thing. When he said thank you, and what I understood is that she was like, I wasn't doing this for you. I wasn't like, oh, let me give him something. No, she wanted to be with him. Like, and maybe it didn't start that way, but it grew into this thing. And now when he thanked her for it, it made him see like she was like giving him something he could take away. She was giving him something that was a gift, that she didn't want anything in return. But I don't think that was the case. She wanted his love in return for hers. So that's what I think that might have been. Ooh, Thank you, Verena Lightwood. One of my favorite lines. I think I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. It's like right here. Nope. Well, night is black in the same way. May as well be a rainbow. I think Hagar and Ruth have two things in common. They're both weird and obsessed with milkman. They are. I don't know why I'd use highlighters. I didn't have a pen or anything to put a little mark. When she cut Milkman's shoulder, I think that gave insight to how she was capable of hurting him, but actually killing him was a step too far, though I'm not sure. I know, but I can't see the sun. And there are no lights on. Like, all my lights are on back there, and this is like a window, so... As the stars made themselves visible, Milkman tried to figure out what was true. And what part of him was true had anything to do with him. I think Hagar will start chewing nuts, like Ruth and Pilate, sign of frustrated love. Maybe. I think that the character Hagar is like a metaphor, I guess. I mean, sometimes one of our biggest fears is to hurt the ones we love. And I think one of our scariest realizations is that we're capable of that. I thought Morrison's explanation of the first sentence was fascinating. I wrote down, do we put that much thought into what we say right? And what would happen if we did? I don't know. And I think this theme, the fathers may soar and the children may know their names. Because there is a theme of men. Well, we haven't really gotten to this part yet. So we're going to wait because I'm looking at stuff and I see where it's tying in, but we haven't gotten to the part that... Okay. Well, so why did the sister's expression change? Sorry. Why did the sister's expression change when Milkman hit his father? What's going on with them? I don't know. But one of my favorite parts was that Toni Morrison talked about the responsibility that act gave. He not only was responsible for the act and had to carry that weight of having been someone who struck their parent, but also that act forced his father to give him another responsibility of this knowledge of the way his father looked at his mother and that life. I thought that was cool. I thought it was interesting when Emmett Till came up. In The Hate U Give, he is victimized, but in this book, he is thought of as stupid and thoughtless. Well, I mean, those are different perspectives, right? One was a perspective of people who had studied the past and knew of what happened to this young boy named Emmett Till, who was visiting from the north and, whatever happened. Now, we're seeing the reaction of people who are living in that time, who are aware of the prejudices and the dangers of living in that time and of being in the place that Emmett Till was. And these people are saying any person worth their salt, not worth their salt, any person living like us and who we are would understand that what he was doing there was not smart. In their, so they have the context of being alive at the time when it comes out that this person was horribly murdered. Whereas in the future now we can analyze the actions of the past. We can look back on them and we can judge them. We can be like, I can't believe that the society, the country allowed that to happen. Like, and yes, that should never have happened. They're saying, well, there is, it's part of that. I think it's part of the oppression of that world. Infinite possibilities and enormous responsibilities stretched out before him. But he was not prepared to take advantage of the former, or accept the burden of the latter. Yes, love that. Freddie told Milkman to ask Corinthians about what was happening with Guitar. I think maybe more to come on the sisters. Absolutely. I think definitely there's going to be more about this thing. Is she involved? Did they say only men are part of the 7 days? Yeah, so the only white people we hear about are giants in their fields, Roosevelt, Schweitzer, and all from Guitar. I'm still to figure out why. Well, I think it's interesting that, still in a negative way, the novel really idealizes the strong women characters that the female character really depend on male for their survival. There's something about that here. Hold on. It's probably in themes. Themes. Abandoned women. Men's repeated abandonment of women in Song of Solomon shows that the novel's female characters suffer a double burden. Not only are women oppressed by racism, but they must also pay the price for men's freedom. Guitar tells Milkman that black men are the unacknowledged workhorses of humanity, but the novel's events imply that black women more correctly fit this description. The scenes that describe women's abandonment show that in the novel, men bear responsibility only for themselves, but women are responsible for themselves, their families, and their communities. Okay. What comment did I skip? Milkman hitting make it in the conversation that followed is parallel to how, with age, we learn more, but that new knowledge isn't always positive, and often stuff we don't want to hear. Yes, I agree. Awesome. I found it super fascinating the way Pilot's lack of navel made everyone nervous about her and likely to cast her out. Well, it was seen as unnatural. And that's something that's very, in that world, you know, it was, like they said, you're not from God. It's interesting. And yeah, remember, this is a different time, so I don't think not having a belly button is that weird. Although it is hard to explain how that happened. Like, we all have umbilical cords, so there should be something there. So that is interesting. I get all of my info from SparkNotes. I think Hagar should just neuter Milkman. That is awful. I don't think that's ever something someone deserves. The story is like a puzzle with all the characters and stories. I agree. Maybe just less scarring? Yeah. Alright, so we have 15 minutes left. Should we start on quotes? And if you have page numbers and stuff, I can read them if they're long. So if we want to go into quotes, I think that'd be cool. I think Hagar is just the consequences of Milkman's actions. Maybe. Quotes or anything, if you want to give me page numbers, I can read them. If you have... are we finishing the book for next week? I mean, we're on page 160... 337. That's a lot. We're going to split that up into 2 weeks. because I want everyone to really have time to read, and if they have to reread, or you have to, I don't want anyone to feel like they have to rush this book. Top of page 198. We're not on 198. That's too far. I also want to thank you. Thank you for all you have meant to me, for making me happy all these years. I am signing this letter, of course, with love, of course, but more than that, with gratitude. Sweet words. Hey, Cat Fernandez, usually the girl with the quotes. All good, all good. I understand. I mean, I'm missing 3 discs in my life. Maybe. It's not about you living longer. It's about how you live and why. It's about whether your children can make other children. On the very beginning, page 9, it starts Mr. Smith's Blue Wings. Let's read it. Mr. Smith's blue silk wings must have left their mark, because when the little boy discovered, at 4, the same thing Mr. Smith had learned earlier, that only birds and airplanes can fly, he lost all interest in himself. To have to live without that single gift saddened him, and left his imagination so bereft that he appeared dull even to the women who did not hate his mother. The ones who did, who accepted her invitations to tea and envied the doctor's big dark house of 12 rooms and the green sedan, called him peculiar. The others who knew the house was more a prison than a palace, and that the Dodge sedan was for Sunday drives only, felt sorry for Ruth Foster and her daughters, and called her son deep, even mysterious. End of chapter 6. Okay, cool, sorry. I was like, how does that quote start, Captain Moser? He wasn't sure he trusted anybody who didn't like sweets. Is that 156? I think our books have different page numbers. I need to know maybe chapters too. I wish I'd have known more people. I would have loved them all. If I'd known more, I would have loved more. His life was pointless, aimless, and it was true that he didn't concern himself an awful lot about other people. There was nothing he wanted bad enough to risk anything for, inconvenience himself for. Because the fact is that I am a small woman. I don't mean little, I mean small. And I'm small because I was pressed small. Macon kept telling me the things you're scared of weren't real. What difference does it make if the thing you're scared of is real or not? Give me one sec. Yeah? No thank you. Maybe later. I would love to read audiobooks. I would love to. You want to fly, you got to give up the shit that weighs you down. That's a good one. Thank you, LaPresta Mariana. If you're trying to make a world where one day white people will think before they lunch, last page of chapter 6. Lynch. It's not about you living longer. It's about how you live and why. It's about whether your children can make other children. It's about trying to make a world where one day white people will think before they lynch. Pretty cool. Okay, one thing I want to talk about, because it was a question I had, I haven't figured this out. Why are Guitar and Pilot obsessed with geography? Why? What does geography give them? What does geography do for them? Knowing the place of things, does that help them understand themselves? Does that help them understand the world in which they live? Why is geography so important to only these two characters? Milkman could give a shit. Could care less. Couldn't care less about geography. But why does Pilot love it? Why does she like knowing where things are? And why did she try to seek out where her people were from? And then Guitar. Guitar loves geography. It helps him put things in the world. I think it's cool. They excuse themselves for everything. Every job of work undone, every bill unpaid, every illness, every death was the man's fault. The book won the National Book Critics Circle Award. Yes. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I'm loving this small, also side combo about different types, pardon me, different types of chocolate that people like. That's great. Love dark chocolate, but if it gets too dark chocolate, it gets a little, not sour, but it gets a little strong for me. I love milk chocolate. I'm not sure what percentage it becomes too much, but back to the book real quick. I think for Pilot, it's a way to see where she was going, and where she wanted to be. Maybe it gives him a sense of control. Guitar is mainly about the north-south, though. I find geography and history so important to my sense of self. Interesting. They are the more intellectual characters in this book. Geography might be a reference to how they think they have their path figured out, or they think they know how the world works. Maybe. Maybe they'll enjoy Into the Wild. Pilot uses geography as a way of explaining her life, but also as a way of deciding where to go in the future. Honestly, not sure, though. Haven't got a coherent thought on that yet. They both seem to be the only characters who know their place in the world. Geography. Ha! Thank you, Katrin Moser. That's dope. I just got chills. Maybe it's because they like... I guess that's an important thing for all of us. I mean, knowing where we came from, knowing who we were. To, like, oh my gosh. This is going all the way back to our first book. We have to look at the past in order to see which way we're going. Looking at the past in order to see the future. Wow, cool tie-in there. Geography may also could link the idea of seeing where you've been or where you're going. We just had the same thought. Oh, those chocolate oranges are so good. Yes. Maybe it's the fact that Pilot has wandered a lot. Pilot has piloted around the country. I like geography, but I don't like time zones. Yo, time zones mess me up, as some of you know, because I said the wrong time zone for today's live. I'm glad many of you made it. Well, the other day we went with a couple and got talking about books. I mentioned Into the Wild, and it turns out Krakauer is the girl's uncle. No way! That's cool. That's cool. No fruit and chocolate. Whoa, Verena Laywood. Yes, fruit and chocolate. Chocolate-covered bananas are great. Chocolate-covered oranges, that this one specific thing, they're actually really, really good. I had one for the first time, recently. But we have 5 minutes left, so let's stick to this. Riding backwards made him uneasy. It was like flying blind, not knowing where he was going, just where he had been. It troubled him. Also, Milkman has this constant fear of not fear, but what's behind him? What's in the past? What's pushing who he is? And I think we might see that further on in the book. This idea of him trying to discover what was behind him. Because I think that's an interesting moment when he pees on his sister because she startled him, because he was ever aware of what's behind him. But I know Bone Dark Chocolate's really good too. Alright, So we only have a few minutes left. I know we still have a lot of things to talk about, but that's okay because this book is incredible. I'm glad it seems that everyone's enjoying it. I'm glad that we get to continue reading it, and I'm very excited to do so. So, how do we feel? I had said chapter 11, because chapter 11 gave us enough time, and then it's only 5 more chapters for us to get through. Oh, whoa, that's a part 2 of the book. I didn't know that. Would have had us read to that. Part 2. Part 2 is like 280 to 337. I think we'll go to chapter 11 so that we can break up this last bit into 2 weeks so that if we do need to reread and continue, we can do that. If you want to finish the book, that's fine. That's okay. Just remember, we're only going to talk up to a certain part. So let's go, let me look at that. Chapter 11 is on what page for me? I wish I was one of the people that could read like this. Like, wow. We're going to read up. We're going to read up to chapter 11. Don't read through chapter 11. Up to chapter 11. So read chapter 10. We will do that so that we can split it up. So if anyone needs to reread or wants to go back and read a chapter, we have time. We're not doing that much left for these last 2 weeks. We'll be good. We'll be very good. Thank you guys for joining. Next Sunday, I'm going to try to stick to Sundays from now on because I like Sundays really work for me. So Sundays are the way to go. So again, I will let you know closer to Sunday at what point we will read. At what time we will have our discussion over the next 80 to 100 pages reading. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for your time. Have a great weekend. Rest of your weekend. The live will be at 11 a.m. It might be a little earlier. I'll let you guys know. It might be earlier. Yeah, it might be a little earlier. But yes, so thank you guys for reading. Remember, continue to be curious. Keep questioning things. Keep learning. Continue to be positive forces of change in your communities. Thank you guys. I will talk to you soon. Keep enjoying the book. Have a good one, and until next time.